How is the military focusing this search, especially as Iran has not been able to locate this crew member?
Anytime there are operations, air operations, you have HC-130 cargo aircraft that are search and rescue with Blackhawks flying in rotation, ready to go in literally, within minutes of there being a problem. And then, of course, those aircraft, which are very slow moving and they fly very low, they are also escorted by fighters. So it's something where the response to be able to find an American pilot would be extensive and immediate. And of course, my thoughts, of course, are with the pilots and their families, as well as the entire rescue team and their families as well, because they're all in harm's way as they try to safeguard this remaining American fighting man.
We had some really important reporting here on CNN last night by Natasha Bertrand and team about Iran's capabilities and just how capable they are when it comes to launching missiles and drones. And I think that if you are an American who has been listening to the rhetoric of this administration, it might surprise you to know that, yes, Iran has, certainly suffered in its capabilities, but it still has a considerable amount of them. What does this event tell us about Iran's capabilities?
I think it tells us more about what the administration is saying in terms of, to the extent of exaggerating certain factors. It's important to understand that while the offensive capabilities of Iran have been greatly diminished, they have substantial ability to still strike out at its neighbors and to strike out at our military bases. On top of that, their ground capability, if we were to go in and occupy anything, is quite frankly massive. And having several thousand airborne or light infantry soldiers are not going to be sufficient against the Iranian army. We do have the strongest military on the planet. The reality is we have to be able to be thoughtful in how we would do any kind of an operation if it was to involve ground forces.
What is the psychological effect on this event for U.S. forces and also for the American public?
For the U.S. military, it's a very sad, but it's an essential part of, quite frankly, the why we serve. We serve to defend the Constitution, to defend the American people, to implement and to execute the lawful orders of our leaders to the best that we can. And so obviously it hurts significantly to lose an aircraft or to lose a fellow airman. And at the same time, people are dedicated to the cause and they will persevere. In terms of the American public, that's a different story. It will vary according to their beliefs in the administration and then how close they are to military families as well. I just hope that everybody is united in supporting our military and their families.
Yeah, certainly hoping that they are united in that. General, we do have some new video, and this is coming from Iranian state-run media showing Iranians looking for, I don't know if it's just this remaining unrecovered crew member or if this was at the point when both had been unaccounted for. But the point is that they're really incentivizing people to go out and look. They have been offering a reward for anyone who might capture one of these Americans. What are your concerns here?
Well, it does not surprise me that the Iranian regime is incentivizing people to look, the local population to look. I am somewhat encouraged by at least the official releases have said, do not harm the pilot, make sure that he is kept safe. And so those are very encouraging words in the event that the Iranian people find this individual first. As we know, when we lost pilots in North Vietnam, they were not always treated that way whatsoever. They were many times tortured, beaten, and so on. So let's hope that if that pilot is captured, that he is treated under the rules of the Geneva Convention, which of course is a bottom line important baseline for all American military members.
There are a lot of scenarios that come to mind here, Boris, but as you can see, this, of course, is the ejection seat right here. It appears to have some damage associated with it. This would be consistent with an explosion that would be a natural part of the actual ejection. So basically, these have an explosive charge. These ejection seats have an explosive charge underneath them, and that forces, that explosive charge, when activated, forces the person that's sitting in the seat up out of the aircraft, and then that's when the parachutes are deployed and things like that happen. So this is not inconsistent with a safe ejection, and it's something that is definitely survivable from that, assuming that the impact and everything was as we see here, where everything is kind of right side up in this case.
Yeah. When it was initially reported, state media in Iran suggested that this was an F-35 stealth fighter jet, but upon closer inspection of some of the photos of the wreckage, analysts have since determined that this is more likely an F-15. It's more consistent with the makeup of an F-15. Help us understand.
Yeah, that is absolutely right. So, you basically look at the type of metal that is used in this particular case. You look at the markings, and you look at the way in which all of this is, printed in, stenciled in here, and the type of rivets that you see. All of that is consistent with an F-15. It is definitely not an F-35. And that is important because an F-15 is not a stealth aircraft. The F-35 is a stealth aircraft, and it's harder to detect, almost impossible for standard radar to detect the F-35. F-15 can be detected by radar.
Yeah, if it were an F-35, I imagine that it would symbolize a different capacity for Iran's military, whereas this does not. I do want to get your thoughts on the video that was geolocated by CNN showing a plane flying low over the ground while two helicopters are nearby. It's believed to be part of the rescue operation. Walk us through what's happening.
Yeah, so what you see here is there's a refueling aircraft here. That's a C-130, an HC-130, and that's designed to refuel helicopters like this. These are probably the HH-60 helicopters that are being used by the Air Force's search and rescue capability. There's a search and rescue unit that's out of the 1st Special Operations Wing that could possibly be involved in this. And these aircraft are designed to extend the range of the helicopters so they can go further into the area that we have here. So when you look at the area that you see here, this is in southwestern Iran called Khuzestan province. This is the area where this is most likely to have occurred, and it is an area where they would have had the capability to refuel even in Iranian airspace, so that could then extend their range into other parts of Iran if necessary.
Put this into context for us, because even if it is an F-15 and not an F-35, there is still some symbolism to draw from this, especially because just a few nights ago, you had the President of the United States touting the U.S. military's ability to destroy Iran's offensive capability. We've heard the Defense Secretary talking about dominion over the skies of Iran. This contradicts that to a degree. To a degree it does, yeah. And so you see, when you look at all of these strikes right here, there's a considerable amount of effort that was put into this. So there's no doubt that basically thousands of strike sorties were flown against western Iran, southern Iran, and of course the area around Tehran. And when you look at the concentration right here of strikes in this area, and then you look at the types of strikes that were done here in the western part of the country and in the west central part of the country, you can see that there are a lot of areas that have been hit. And of course, the Iranians are doing the same thing over here in Israel as well. But having said all of that, the key thing is this: no matter how often you strike at targets like this, there are still capabilities that are existent within the Iranian arsenal. CNN reporting has at least half of the missile forces that were believed to have existed before the war still in existence right now. And one of the reasons for that is the way that they can disperse these forces. They have them on mobile launchers. They have them on trucks basically that go all over the place that are harder to detect. And plus they bury them underground. So they have these hardened tunnels that are designed specifically to survive these kinds of attacks. Iran has been preparing for this kind of a war for a very long time. And we're seeing the results of that preparation. It doesn't mean that they're winning, but what it does mean is that they have a capability to not only fight back, but they have a capability
capability to down some of our aircraft if we're not careful and if the proper defenses aren't dispersed by the aircraft itself. F-15 does have the capability to disperse some defensive chaff, for example, which is like aluminum foil coming out of the aircraft. But be that as it may, they can do a lot of damage to aircraft like that, especially if it's a heat-seeking missile as opposed to a radar.
Let's bring Spider Marks in. Does it feel to you, General, that it's moving in this direction to put boots on the ground?
Well, I certainly hope not. But first, I feel like I may be on the wrong panel. We're talking Belushi and daycare. So
you're on the right panel. I can
sure
assure you. I can assure you.
Dialed in.
You are dialed in. And we want to
right
get your military perspective, especially when it comes to the boots on the ground, because that is something that obviously would be a big escalation and would put a lot of American soldiers in harm's way. Do you see that happening?
Yeah, Pamela, the deal is we've got 2 Marine Expeditionary Units showing up in the course of a few days. You'll have that's about 5,000 plus. Then you have the 82nd Airborne, elements of the 82nd that are on call. Some elements have already been in theater. So let's just give them a round number of about 10,000. That would be an insignificant number of troops in order to either go ashore north of the straits and try to clear out that element of the Zagros Mountains. Could it be done? Oh, yeah. I mean, the Marine Corps and look, I grew up in that space. We can do that. We can do that. But is that what you want to do in that type of an environment with the risks of the Iranians maybe turning that into what we call a dirty battlefield with chemicals? I mean, nobody has ever lined up. And I was Mr. WMD when we went to war in Iraq, and nobody has ever dialed down what Iran's capacity is to deliver either biological weapons or chemical weapons. That would be a nasty, dirty environment. CENTCOM is playing through all that. They are planning for that. But boots on the ground would be for what particular purpose? And what I hear is securing the highly enriched uranium. My first question is, how much do they have? Do we have a good sense of that? I grew up in the intelligence community, and we can get it wrong. And, oh, by the way, where is it? It's just not necessarily in Esfahan, Natanz, or Fordo. It could be in somebody's backyard or on the back of a truck migrating through the countryside.
On that note, I want to play this sound from Trump. On that note, just hold your thoughts and then talk about it on the other side really quick. Let's listen to this. Oh, actually, this is what he said. This is what he told, I believe, Reuters. He said, in terms of the enriched uranium, that's so far underground, I don't care about that. We'll always be watching it by satellite. And he said Iran was incapable of developing a weapon now. What do you think about that?
Let me go to the second part of that statement. I agree. They're probably incapable of doing that based on the damage that they've suffered over the course of last summer's strikes and what they have had to suffer through, which is a good deal for them to suffer through it, I think, over the course of last month. So what the United States, I can say with certainty, we've delayed their ability to develop a nuclear weapon. We will never know with certainty until you can start to open doors, put boots on the ground and do it. That's the challenge.
I talked with a former Navy intelligence official who told me certain flights and other movements from bases housing special forces indicates to him that a ground invasion, ground mission of some kind is imminent. What are you seeing when it comes to the next stage of this conflict? How strong is that possibility?
I think that's been discussed repeatedly over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and you have visible evidence of that. You have the 2 amphibious ships, Marine amphibious ships, one of which, the USS Tripoli, is floating right outside the Strait of Hormuz, waiting for orders. You have the Boxer, another amphibious ship prepared to go forward. And as well, you have our Army 82nd Airborne, which is used for immediate interdiction. It's absolutely appropriate if you're trying to seize an island such as Karg Island to have the 82nd parachute in, seize the runways, and then prepare for the amphibious assault by our Marines. And equally, and consistent with other conversation, when you address the special forces, that instantaneously raises the expectation that these specialized units, the direction given to these specialized units is to move as quickly as possible to seize the remnants of the Iranian uranium repositories. So yeah, there is significant substance to this. Now, of course, the question is whether we will take that type of action, and it remains to be seen. Tonight, the conversation, the presentation by the president perhaps will give us an idea of what direction he seeks to take.
Yeah, we will see what the president says tonight. The president, in an interview with a British newspaper published this morning, Major General says the U.S. is considering leaving NATO over what he says is the alliance's lackluster military support for his war against Iran. And the remarks, they come just as the British Prime Minister says it's not the UK's war and they won't be dragged into it. I want you to listen to something else that the Prime Minister said about NATO here.
Firstly, NATO is the single most effective military alliance the world has ever seen. And it has kept us safe for many decades, and we are fully committed to NATO.
Now, Major General, I do want to kind of get your instant analysis here, because Trump said to the Telegraph, quote, "It's beyond reconsideration of NATO membership after the war. I was never swayed by NATO. I always knew they were a paper tiger, and Putin knows that too, by the way." So what do you make of these comments and what the Prime Minister said, what it could mean for NATO and the world?
I'll have to tell you, all of us who have served any amount of time in the U.S. Armed Forces have found ourselves in Europe, in that part of the world, that area of operations, supporting the efforts of NATO to maintain that tenuous peace from the Second World War all the way up to now. I think it would be extraordinarily dangerous for peace in that region, peace in the entire world, if the U.S. unilaterally terminated its relationship with NATO, which has, to incorporate the Prime Minister's perspective and statements, has been one of the most successful relationships, security relationships that this world has seen historically. If it's the president's decision to do that and to make that unilateral decision, there will be multiple consequences, including a new perspective on the part of our then former NATO allies as to how they themselves will stand up against aggression in Europe. And we see every single day that aggression demonstrated, not only what we see in Iran, which is the topic for today, but we've got to return to that war that has been visible in front of all of us for at least the last 4 years, and that is Ukraine.
What would it take to take Karg Island?
Well, first of all, Fareed, it's great to be back with you again. I've really enjoyed our conversations in the past, and you're very kind. It depends. When you talk about taking an island, it's not just the seizure of that landmass, it's also what you plan to do. When we're talking what's happening right now, as you just mentioned, there's a lot of military personnel in the area, estimates close to 30 to 50,000, but those are spread out all over the place. Getting to Karg, which is far north along that coastline, is going to take more than a Marine amphibious unit. When you're talking about a MU, a Marine Expeditionary Unit, you're talking somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 soldiers. There's 2 of them in the area. That brings it to 5,000. The brigade, the immediate ready response brigade of the 82nd Airborne Division has also gone in with their tactical command post. That adds about another 5,000. So all told, you have about 10,000 forces in the area. But the question remains, what are they going to do? Are they going to seize an island? Are they going to protect the coast? Are they going to go into some of the islands we haven't talked much about, Musa, Al-Tut, the Tombs? So really the question becomes, what is your troop to task relationship? What kind of things are you asking the military to do? What is the calculation for the type of force that should go in there? And then once you have that, you have to calculate not only the support from the standpoint of intelligence and air power, but also logistics support. When you're looking at Karg Island, which is very close to the shore, there is the potential for Iran defending that as part of what they see as an just a threat to an existential threat to their country.
What about forcing open the Straits of Hormuz, maybe by seizing tankers? How easy would that be?
Well, to secure the mouth of the straits, you have to also control some of the landmass around it. You'll hear names like Larak or Abu Musa or the Greater and Lesser Tombs in the straits. Those give you the capability to overwatch the straits. So you still have to have a land operation. In terms of seizing tankers, a very difficult mission, or escorting tankers on also a very difficult mission. Right now, I would suggest you've overtasked the Navy, because when you have two carrier strike groups in the area, those cruisers and the destroyers that are part of that strike group are conducting a mission to protect the carrier and to launch Tomahawks. Suddenly, if you say, okay, now you also have to escort literally hundreds of cargo ships through that strait, you're really overtasking the capability of the ships in that fleet. So again, we have to look at what are the troop to task relationship, this time in point of the Navy. And all of these, Fareed, I can't emphasize this enough, all of these are extremely dangerous mission. And truthfully, Iran is not going to roll over. As I said, this entire attack against them is an existential threat. They are fighting for their territorial integrity and their national resolve right now.
And finally, Mark, and we don't have a lot of time, these are tactical issues. Even if we succeed, do they then provide you with a strategic victory?
They don't, Fareed, because I don't know what the strategic end state is just yet. As you pointed out so rightfully at the beginning of your show, there are many missions that the president has named, the kinds of things that he wants to do, and he has been shifting back and forth between those on multiple occasions. A military takes individual battles, the fight that we've been seeing with the aircraft and the naval vessels, and now we're including a ground force to that. They combine all of those into an operational campaign, all of which are directed toward achieving the end state of the strategy. If you don't have the end state of a strategy, what the politicians want you to do, and it's very succinct and it doesn't change, it's going to be very confusing for the men and women in uniform to execute the operations.
He says, quote, the upcoming days will be decisive. General, from a military perspective, what is he likely referencing here?
I think the first part of that statement refers indirectly to the president's threat to obliterate much of the infrastructure within Iran on or after April the 6th. Now, whether there's a surprise coming up in the next few days, beginning of April, nobody really knows. We do have information repeated by some of your contributors that the Marines in the USS Tripoli, 1,800 of them plus support elements, are situated outside the Strait of Hormuz. Whether that destination of that amphibious force, which will be reinforced by another Marine Expeditionary Unit coming from San Diego, plus the 82nd Airborne, whether that means the actual discussed attack on Karj Island, we don't know, but that is a potentiality. That and or use of special forces and increased bombardment.
Well, this morning, President Trump also scolded U.S. allies for not helping to keep the oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. Secretary Hegseth was asked if the U.S. is still committed to NATO and its collective defense, and here's what he had to say.
As far as NATO is concerned, that's a decision that will be left to the president, but I'll just say a lot has been laid bare. A lot has been shown to the world about what our allies would be willing to do for the United States of America when we undertake an effort of this scope on behalf of the free world. These are missiles that don't even range the United States of America. They range allies and others, and yet when we ask for additional assistance or simple access basing and overflight, we get questions or roadblocks or hesitations.
And of course, a backdrop of that is several U.S. allies saying this is not our war and not letting U.S. military planes land and so forth. What do you think the administration is signaling overall here?
Well, we have our allies, as you suggested, who have complained loudly and vigorously that they were not consulted regarding our commencement of this war campaign against Iran. I think within their citadels of power, they are concerned about the consequences of becoming too closely associated with the United States. And then you couple that with a concern, and this concern is based upon statements made by President Trump that indeed the Straits of Hormuz might not be a critical objective on the part of American forces, and that we might, based upon conditions that could be realized in the next couple of days, decide that we have accomplished our objectives, backed off. But then instantaneously, what that does is it throws the burden of clearing the Straits of Hormuz onto those who have the greatest need for the resources that are coming through the Persian Gulf. And those countries that have the greatest need, both on the east with Japan and as well in Western Europe, are NATO allies. That is going to be their problem. So you could argue that it is to our NATO allies' best interest right now to participate with us, because if we back away, if the United States backs away, then that problem becomes insurmountable. It will either be armed conflict or perhaps more likely the imposition of huge tariffs by Iran on any ships that seek passage through the Straits of Hormuz, many of which are flagged or associated with our Western NATO allies.
How much leverage does Iran have right now when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz? And are you surprised at all by how Iran is able to wield that leverage in this war?
Gosh, you gave me a simple one. No, partly because this is not the first time that this has occurred. Certainly, if we reach back, 40 years or so, in the 1980 to 88 Iran-Iraq war, the exact same thing took place. The Iranians did not have much of a military force at that time against Iraq. At that time, Iraq was an ally of the United States. And as an asymmetric defense activity, the Iranians then decided to attack cargo ships, oil ships within the Persian Gulf. That was one powerful strategy. The U.S. joined into that conflict to provide ship escort, but that is extremely dangerous, and equally the challenge that might percolate, and that is over on the Red Sea, which is a discussion we could have regarding the Houthis and the Houthis' relationship with the Iranians, and whether there's going to be some synergistic effort between the Houthis and the Red Sea and the Iranians on the Persian Gulf to really shut down all petroleum commerce in this area of this part of the world.
So it sounds like what you're saying is they have a lot of leverage right now.
You bet.
How on earth does this war actually come to an end, General?
I think it could come to an end if the United States goes through its diplomatic contacts. Let's say Pakistan, China comes in, people talk to the Iranian government. I think the Iranian government is split. I think you've got a civilian political leader who's at odds with the one-star Iranian IRGC designated commander. I think the Iranian commander is a hard-nosed guy who just wants to fight it out to the end. But I think the political leaders have better sense. It may take China, Pakistan, Turkey, and other countries to persuade them to back off these extreme demands, and let's get the strait open, and then we'll go from there. But I think this is a time that we've got to use our diplomacy and our maximum push.
It's interesting that you're quite optimistic about the possibility that we could see an end. You know, you have Donald Trump essentially saying that from his perspective, regime change is already underway. And obviously he's pointing to the fact that you have a lot of Iran's top leaders who, of course, were decimated and killed in that February 28th attack. I mean, obviously, regime change takes a lot more than that. You have to sort of dismantle the entire system. It's not just about killing leaders. And the US president is also talking about the fact that the Americans are negotiating or talking to other potential leaders within Iran as well? I mean, what do we know for sure at this point? And obviously, just because the Americans are talking to new groups of people does not mean that those people are ever going to get their hands on the top job, just in terms of being in power.
Yes, that's the problem. We don't know exactly who we're talking to. At least we in the public don't know this. I'm sure the administration has some ideas, but this is a regime. We put it under a lot of stress. We've got people who are struggling to survive and get through it. And then we've got our intermediaries, Turkey, Pakistan, hopefully China will put pressure on the government there and the IRGC to open up the straits, stop this crazy going after desalination plants and infrastructure, because it's going to result in a huge global catastrophe if it goes that way. But if it does go that way, I'm confident the United States will eventually prevail in this, that we will open up the straits eventually. It may take quite a military operation to do it, but the end is inevitable against Iran, and it's not in their favor. So they should understand that this is the time. They've made their point. They closed the straits. Okay, now let's open it up and get back as close as we can to business as usual and stop threatening other nations in the region.
Because we are running out of time, I'm going to ask you two questions in one, if I may, General. The fact that you have the U.S. Air Force E-3 aircraft that was hit by an Iranian missile strike, just your take on that, how sort of serious is that? And then also the fact that it's taken 5 weeks for Houthi rebels to actually enter this conflict. Does that surprise you that it took essentially so long?
Well, it doesn't take. It is surprising there wasn't greater action. I am concerned about the loss of the AWACS aircraft because it indicates that we do need to strengthen our high altitude, medium altitude defenses in the region, as well as our counter drone actions. And we need to put pressure on Russia to stop providing them the accurate targeting information that Russia is providing. This is not the time to coddle Russia. It's the time to talk turkey to Russia. That is to say, stop providing the assistance. We can do more in Ukraine. Let's get this situation resolved here in the Middle East. And your assistance to Iran is complicating it, not helping resolve it. So I think we need to be strong with Russia at this point. And I do think we need to strengthen our own defenses for our forces and deployments in the region.